Welcome to the deep dive. We take the material you're curious about, and we pull out the core knowledge you need, and fast.
That's the idea.
Today we're digging to Built to Last, Successful Habits of Visionary Companies. This is a book you wanted to explore, to really get what makes some companies, not just hang on, but really lead for the long term.
Yeah, exactly.
You're looking for those key insights, those aha moments, right? Without wading through pages and pages. And, well, that's what we aim to do.
It's fascinating stuff, honestly. The authors, they really wanted to get under the hood, understand what makes these companies tick for so long,
Right.
how they build that endurance, achieve these, well, extraordinary things. They felt a lot of the common wisdom was a bit shallow, too focused on just the leader figure. So yeah, our plan today is to break down what they found, give you a clear picture of the main principles.
And they start with a pretty, a mind-blowing stat, don't they?
They really do.
Imagine this. You invest $1 in a collection of these visionary companies way back in 1926.
Okay.
By 1990, that single dollar, it's worth $6,356. Incredible.
Wow.
Now, compare that. The same dollar in similar but ultimately less successful companies.
Yep.
$955.
Big difference.
Huge. Or just in the general market.
Yeah.
$415.
Oof.
That kind of massive, sustained outperformance, it just screams that something fundamentally different is going on inside these places. So where do we even start trying to figure that out?
Well, I think a really good place to begin is by questioning something we almost take for granted,
Okay.
which is the idea that these visionary companies are basically built by these, charismatic, larger-than-life leaders. Book argues pretty strongly against this great leader myth.
Okay, let's unpack that, because that is the story we hear all the time, isn't it?
Exactly.
The heroic CEO, steering the ship to glory single-handedly. So what did the book find that was, well, surprising about these leaders?
Well, when you actually look closely at the visionary companies in the study, think about the early days of places like 3M or HP or Sony. You often find leaders who just didn't fit that typical charismatic mold at all.
Really? Like who?
Well, take William McKnight at 3M. He started as an assistant bookkeeper, worked his way up, and how is he described? Soft-spoken, gentle, a good listener, humble.
Doesn't sound like a typical firebrand CEO.
Not at all. Or Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard at HP. They were engineers, first and foremost. They kind of grew into being organization builders, but they weren't necessarily these magnetic public figures, especially not early on.
Ah, okay. So that's a key thing right there. Enduring success. It's less about one brilliant person and more about the system they build, like a machine that keeps creating value.
Precisely. Yeah. And it gets even clearer when you look at the comparison companies.
The ones that didn't quite make it to the same level.
Right. Many of them also had strong leaders, especially in those critical early phases. So leadership itself wasn't the magic bullet, And this is where the book brings in a really powerful idea, the difference between clock building and time telling.
Clock building versus time telling. Okay, I like the sound of that. How does that play out?
Think of it like this. A time teller might have a fantastic idea or maybe a really magnetic personality that just captures the moment.
Right, tells you the time right now.
Exactly. But a clock builder, they're focused on building the actual mechanism, the organization that can consistently tell the time, produce great results long after they're gone.
Ah, I see.
The focus shifts, away from relying on just one brilliant idea or one person towards creating something robust, something lasting, an institution.
Can you give some concrete examples? Where do we see this clock building?
Absolutely. Think about Walt Disney. The authors argue his biggest creation wasn't Mickey Mouse or even Disneyland, amazing as they are.
Okay.
It was the Walt Disney Company itself, an organization designed to just keep generating that magic.
The Dream Factory.
Yeah. Or Sam Walton. His main goal wasn't just getting rich, it was, in his words, building the finest retailing company.
The focus was the company.
Right. And Hewlett and Packard. They obsessed over designing an environment, an organization that would keep churning out innovative products, not just that first audio oscillator they built.
So the real work is building that resilient structure, the culture, the capabilities.
Yeah.
Stuff that outlasts any single leader.
Exactly. And, the early struggles some of these visionary companies faced really drive this home. HP, for example, they had a period early on where their product development was kind of all over the place.
Okay.
Sony, their very first product, a rice cooker that didn't sell well.
Huh. Really?
Yeah. And their first tape recorder wasn't an instant smash hit either. These weren't overnight successes built on one genius product.
So they had to stick with it.
They persevered, they experimented, but always with this underlying focus on building that organizational muscle, that core strength. So the key takeaway here is, yeah, leadership mattered in both the visionary and the comparison companies early on, but the visionary ones, they prioritized building the clock, the enduring organization, more than just telling time with a flash-in-the-pan idea or relying solely on the leader's charisma.
Okay, that's a really clear difference. So if it wasn't just the great leader, what's the next big piece of the puzzle? What else set these companies apart?
The second major pillar they identified is the power of core ideology.
Core ideology, okay.
These lasting companies, they have this deeply held, consistently lived set of core beliefs, their fundamental values, and a sense of purpose that goes beyond just, making money.
So it's more than just a mission statement hanging on the
Yeah,
wall.
much more, yeah. And the book busts a couple of myths here.
Okay.
First, there's no single correct set of core values that works for everyone. You find visionary companies with wildly different ideologies. The crucial thing isn't what the values are, but how deeply the company believes in them and how consistently they show up in everything the company does.
Right.
The real insight is that what matters less than how deeply they're held and lived. It has to be authentic, integrated, not just words on paper.
That's a really important distinction. So one company might be all about, say, environmental sustainability, another about relentless innovation.
Yeah.
Totally different values, but both could be visionary if they truly live those values day in, day out.
Absolutely. And the second myth they tackle is this idea that the only constant is change.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Well, that doesn't really apply to the core ideology, according to the book. Visionary companies guard their core ideology almost religiously. They change it very, very rarely, if ever. This core ideology acts like an anchor, a stable foundation, and then they adapt everything else around it, strategies, practices, products, you name it.
So the core values are like the bedrock, totally solid, and everything else can shift and evolve on top of that.
Exactly. Yeah. The book gives some great examples of these stated core values. HP talked about contributing to society, affordable quality, profit, and growth being means to those bigger goals.
Right.
Johnson & Johnson, their credo, it prioritizes alleviating pain and disease, and it lays out this clear hierarchy. Customers first, then employees, society, and shareholders last.
Quite explicit.
Very. Sony's early vision, it was about the joy of tech innovation benefiting the public, elevating Japanese culture, being a pioneer, respecting individuals. Walmart's core, simple, deliver value to customers, lower prices, bigger selection.
Very focused.
And Merck, Roy Vagelos famously looked 100 years ahead and talked about their timeless purpose, fighting disease, relieving suffering, helping people.
Those are powerful.
Yeah.
Really distinct from each other. It's striking how different they are, yet how, fundamental they feel to each company's identity.
Exactly. Now compare that to the companies that didn't endure quite as well. The authors found, for instance, that Merck seemed far more driven by this clear ideology than, say, Pfizer, even though both are big pharma companies.
Interesting comparison.
Or Philip Morris showed a stronger sense of core purpose around its products than RJR Nabisco did. This depth of belief, this ideological drive, it really seems to be a differentiator.
And the book talks about the genius of the A&D too, right? This idea that visionary companies can hold seemingly opposite ideas at the same time.
Yes, that's absolutely vital. They reject what the authors call the tyranny of the OR, this limiting idea that you have to choose either A or B.
Like profit or purpose.
Exactly. Instead, they cultivate the genius of the A&D. They actively figure out how to pursue both A and B simultaneously. David Packard at HP explicitly talked about pursuing profit and a purpose beyond profit.
They saw them as connected.
Right. They understood that being profitable actually enables them to achieve those broader, more idealistic goals.
So it's about getting past that either or trap, finding ways to hit seemingly conflicting targets, like stability and progress.
Precisely. And to make this core ideology really stick, visionary companies work hard to make it pervasive. It's everywhere.
How do they do that?
Well, through things like really rigorous indoctrination for new hires, careful selection and promotion of managers who genuinely buy into the ideology, and yeah, by building what you might even call almost cult-like cultures around these core beliefs.
Cult-like sounds a bit intense.
It can, but in this context, it's really about a very strong, shared, and constantly reinforced set of values and purpose. Think about places like Nordstrom or IBM back in the day, Disney, Procter and Gamble. They all had or have these really defined ways of embedding their ideology.
Okay, so it's about deep belief and unwavering consistency in living it out.
That's the essence. And the authors stress that this core ideology should feel timeless, independent of whatever's happening outside, kind of like the core principles in a constitution.
Okay, so we've got clock building over time telling and this deeply ingrained, lived core ideology. What's the third critical thing that makes these companies stand out?
The third big one is this concept: preserve the core, stimulate progress.
Preserve the core, stimulate progress.
Visionary companies hold on to that stable core ideology we just talked about, but at the same time, they drive relentless progress and change in pretty much everything else.
So it's like having that solid anchor of values, but constantly pushing the boat forward, innovating, adapting everything else.
Exactly that. The core ideology gives them the stability they need to allow for constant evolution, experimentation, and change in all the non-core stuff.
How do they stimulate that progress? What are the mechanisms?
The book points out several key ways. One of the most memorable is setting big, hairy, audacious goals. BHAGs.
BHAs. I love that acronym. Tell me more about those. What makes a goal a BHA?
BHAs are, well, they're huge, ambitious, long-term goals. They really energize and focus the whole organization on something significant way down the road.
Examples.
Think about Ford's crazy early goal: democratize the automobile, make it for everyone.
Wow. Audacious indeed.
Or Sony's ambition to completely change the worldwide image of products made in Japan.
Huge undertaking.
Yeah. Or Walmart's early sales targets that seemed impossible at the time.
Yeah.
IBM's massive gamble on the System 360 computer line. Citicorp aiming to become this great national bank when banking was very regional.
These aren't just small incremental goals, they're leaps.
Exactly. They galvanize people. They inspire everyone to work on something much bigger than just their day-to-day tasks.
Okay, BHAGs. What else?
Another key mechanism is what they describe as evolutionary progress.
Evolutionary, like biology.
Kind of, yeah. Progress happens through constant experimentation, learning from trial and error, grabbing opportunities that pop up, sometimes even through accidents.
Interesting.
Think about 3M's amazing track record of innovation. So many of their hits, like Post-it notes, came from individual employees tinkering, sometimes making mistakes.
The 15% time thing.
Right, things like that. J&J's Band-Aids were also kind of an accidental discovery that became huge. Marriott getting into airline catering wasn't some grand strategic plan, it was opportunistic. American Express evolved into financial and travel services through a series of adaptive steps, not a master blueprint.
So it requires a culture that's okay with trying things, even if they don't work out.
Absolutely. Tolerating failure as part of the process is key. It's about fostering an environment where experimentation is vital for growth, and the company is nimble enough to jump on unexpected chances.
Makes sense. So BAGs, evolutionary progress,
Mhm.
any other mechanisms?
Yes. A third one is deliberately creating mechanisms of discontent.
Mechanisms of discontent.
Yep.
Sounds uncomfortable.
It is, intentionally. It's about building in things that create internal discomfort or challenges to stop complacency from setting in and to drive continuous improvement.
Like what?
Procter & Gamble's brand management system is a classic example. Different P&G brands actively compete against each other in the marketplace.
Internal competition.
Right. That rivalry keeps everyone sharp, pushes innovation, prevents stagnation. Or HP's longtime pay-as-you-go policy, their reluctance to take on debt, forced financial discipline and efficiency.
So the idea is to keep things slightly edgy, never let people get too comfortable.
That seems to be the thinking. These companies understand that sitting back, resting on your laurels, that's the fastest way to decline.
And comparison companies often stumble there.
Yeah, often they were slower to adopt new tech, or they didn't invest enough in the future, or they just got comfortable. Complacency crept in.
Okay, so we have building the clock, the core ideology, and this dynamic of preserving the core while pushing for progress. What's the final piece that pulls it all together?
The last really crucial characteristic is the power of alignment.
Alignment.
Yeah. All the different parts of a visionary company, the structure, the systems, the processes, the culture, the strategies they all have to work together harmoniously, in sync with that core ideology and the progress they're trying to stimulate. The authors basically say, vision, core ideology plus envision future. And alignment is what makes that vision actually happen, brings it to life.
So everything the company does, from the CEO down to the front line, has to line up with the core values and the big goals.
Precisely. Think about it. If a company says teamwork is everything, but their bonus system only rewards individual stars, that's a misalignment.
Right. Sends a mixed message.
Exactly. Or if innovation is supposedly core, but the main strategy is just defending existing products. Another misalignment. You've got to walk the talk consistently across the board.
Any examples of really strong alignment?
Sure. Ford's big turnaround in the 1980s. They laid out their mission, values, and guiding principles, and then they translated that directly into actions like setting up customer focus groups, really pushing quality programs. It wasn't just talk.
The actions match the words.
Yes. Or Merck's research division. It was deeply aligned with their ideology. They created an academic-like atmosphere, encouraged scientists to publish papers, collaborate. They even set up dual career paths, so top scientists didn't have to become managers to advance.
Kept the focus on the science.
Right. And HP consistently reinforced its values, technological contribution, entrepreneurial spirit by hiring top engineers, pushing for genuinely new products, resisting Me Too stuff, and giving managers real power over personnel decisions.
It sounds like it requires constant vigilance, always checking if the different parts of the machine are actually working together, pointing in the same direction based on those core principles.
Absolutely. It's about constantly looking for and then fixing anything that pulls the company away from its core or slows down progress. A truly aligned company. It's so cohesive you could almost feel its values and goals just by watching it operate, even without reading any statements.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've learned that these enduringly successful companies, they focus on building the organization itself, the clock. They're guided by deep, lived core values and purpose. They manage this tension of fiercely protecting that core while also relentlessly driving progress through things like BHAs and evolution. And finally, they make sure everything is tightly aligned, structure, culture, strategy, all pulling together.
That's a great summary. And it's really key to remember this isn't like a recipe book, not a paint by numbers thing. These are fundamental concepts you apply thoughtfully, creatively, adapting them to your own situation.
This has been incredibly helpful. Really shifts the perspective away from just the mythical leader towards the whole system, the whole organization. So maybe a final thought for you, our listener. Think about these ideas in your own world. What clock are you building? Maybe it's your team, a project you're leading, maybe even just your own career. How aligned are your everyday actions with your own core principles, your own big goals? Are there maybe some subtle misalignments holding you back? How can you nurture both that stability in what you value and also keep pushing forward, making progress? Maybe just reflect on the examples we talked about, which ones really clicked for you, and maybe more importantly, why. It might just give you a fresh angle on building something that truly lasts.